What's up, everybody? Welcome to part 2 of my wide receiver rankings for the 2026 NFL Draft. We already did my top 10 earlier in the week, and today we're doing the 11 through 20 ranked wide receivers, and there's actually 13 players in this group that we're going to talk about here today, so you get a little extra bonus content there, if you will. This is going to look very similar to my top 10, except instead of counting up to number 1, we're going to start at 11 and work down. And then I also won't have those film highlights for this one. That is a very timely process to put all of that together, and we do have 10 weeks until the draft and a bunch of other positions still to get to, so that didn't quite make the cut for this one. Hope you understand, but let's go ahead and begin. If you do enjoy today's video, please take a moment to hit that like button down below. It helps this video and my channel tremendously, and make sure you subscribe. Like I said, we have so many other position groups still to do, so you're not going to want to miss my breakdowns coming up for other position groups. But let's begin with my number 11 ranked wide receiver for the 2026 NFL Draft, and that is Chris Brazzell out of Tennessee. And Brazzell here at 11 especially is a testament to how good this wide receiver class is. As I mentioned in part 1 of this positional breakdown, it's a good year to need a wide receiver, and Chris Brazzell in any given year, I could easily be sold as a top 10 wide receiver, and even this year, I could absolutely see if you wanted to rank Chris Brazzell in the top 10. I had a lot of people asking why he didn't make the cut, and I just really like this class, man. Someone was going to fall short, but that doesn't mean I don't like Chris Brazzell. He's a ton of fun, and his upside is some of the best in this entire draft class. He's 6'5" and can run like the wind. He really gets you excited and opens your imagination in terms of his field stretching ability, providing a specific trait that just so few players can do at the next level and do consistently. And that C word is what I think you really come back to with Chris Brazzell that's going to define how successful he's going to be at the next level. Because if you load up his highlight reel, you're going to come away thinking this is a top 5 wide receiver in this draft class because, like I said, his ability to get down the field, force defenses to respect his speed, to stack corners on the outside, it's real. And in his best plays, he shows that beautiful over-the-shoulder ball tracking. He shows the ability to use his height and high point the football and make improbable catches happen. That's what he can do of why you draft Chris Brazzell. But as you go tape to tape, game to game, you see that inconsistency pop up. For one, drops have been a recurring theme for him, and despite he cleaned up north of a 17% drop rate in 2024 that really saw him taken off the field in his first year at Tennessee after transferring to Tulane, he did lower that rate a lot, which makes you comfortable enough to put him in this kind of day 2 range as I have, but he did still have some pretty ugly drops, and I will say he's not like a natural ball skills guy. Even if he's not registering a drop, you do see him a lot of times like let the ball into his chest, kind of double clutch it. Like there's a lot of catches that aren't clean catches necessarily that's just a tape evaluation that indicates that there's potential for more drops in there. So you don't love that. And then the other thing is he's very, very skinny. He's 6'5", 200 pounds. And that does allow him to really run, and it allows him to have a lot of other fluid athletic ability in there that I want to praise him for in just a second. But it does show up as a weakness in that a good, lengthy SEC press corner, and especially an NFL press corner, is going to be able to jam him at the line a little bit, stunt his burst off the line, and especially down the field, they can kind of leave that dragging hand out there and slow his momentum. Brazzell doesn't quite have that natural play strength to just accelerate through those subtle jabs and grabs that you're going to see almost every play at the NFL level. And when he's competing for tough catches, he can get banged around at the catch point, which, as we know, a lot of times it's just not going to get called as pass interference if the guy gets there a little bit early. These bigger wide receivers down the field, oftentimes it doesn't bother them as much. They're able to win those tough catches down the field. Brazzell, I have a lot less trust that if you do have to throw a contested catch to him down the field, I have a lot less trust that he's going to find a way to win it. So there's definitely some weaknesses in there, but I do want to mention something I hinted at, and he's not just a speed threat. You see the 6'5", you see the estimated 40 time for me on the screen there at 4.34, and you're like, oh boy, here we go again. It's just another Tennessee Josh Heupel offense speed threat that's not going to work at the next level. Jalen Hyatt, Dante Thornton, who was a 4th-round pick last year. To be fair, we still have to find out if he's going to develop into a player if the Raiders are ever competent. But with Chris Brazzell, I think it's a balance of that conversation. I think there's absolutely something to be said about the offense that he gets to play in. It's that 2x2 stack wide formation. It's a college-only offense because of the wide hashes, and it does allow speed players like this to eat a ton of open space and really thrive with that speed in a way that you just have to play in shorter areas and with tight coverage way more often in the NFL. So there's going to be a learning curve for any wide receiver coming out of this offense, Chris Brazzell included. So that's baked in. But also with Brazzell, Hyatt and Thornton, they were true straight line speed threats. Chris Brazzell, I actually see a lot more of like a Christian Watson, where he has a rare movement skill set for such a tall wide receiver. He actually has foot speed to run a variety of different routes. If you're down in the red zone and you want him to run a whip route, or he has good footwork to actually beat press in a way that you maybe wouldn't have said about, especially like Jalen Hyatt. He can snap off at the line, and he's got a good baseline in his release technique to actually beat press coverage, which is a massive sign of encouragement. If you want him to snap off and run a dig route or throttle down and come back on a hitch route, he has a lot more, not just agility to run a lot of those routes, but also just the fluid athletic ability, stop-start ability, change of direction, you name it. It's all in there with him. So that's why I put down Christian Watson as a high-end comp. I see a lot of that in Chris Brazzell. Watson's a unique player, right? There's going to be some differences there. Watson, honestly, a lot more like injury concerns than someone like Chris Brazzell, but Watson was a 2nd-round pick, probably drafted a little higher than I think we see Brazzell go, probably more mid to late 2nd round. But we'll see. We know speed comes at a premium. And Watson, like Chris Brazzell, did take some time to adjust and become a really good player for the Green Bay Packers and one of the better overall vertical threats, true vertical threats in the NFL. So that's a best case scenario for Chris Brazzell, but I do think with a lot of the questionable ball skills, the lanky frame coming out of that Josh Heupel offense, someone that's just been an overall inconsistent player, you have some bust potential. And I actually just kind of went with that Packers spectrum of lengthy speed threat wide receivers with MVS. And that's probably lazy because at the end of the day, Brazzell is just a much better overall athlete than Marquez Valdez-Scantling. But in terms of like how he could be used and some of the frustrating drops, and maybe it leads to, a lack of consistent production, I think that's in the realm of, possibilities for Chris Brazzell to be something like an MVS, which still is a useful player, probably not worth a 2nd-round pick, but, still could be a higher floor maybe than some of these other Tennessee wide receivers, if you will. And also, I want to end with this. Chris Brazzell did play in a little bit more of a pro-style offense at Tulane. I actually remember him quite vividly when I evaluated Michael Pratt that year. He was a day 3 quarterback prospect. But Brazzell was awesome at Tulane, obviously a lower level of competition, but he did some more NFL stuff there, especially some of the red zone route running and dig routes and stuff. So he at least also, compared to some of these other Tennessee deep threats that have come out, has played in a different offense and shown some success in it. So that's good to see as well. But a really fun player. It was a bummer that he didn't quite crack the top 10 for me. But again, a 2nd to 3rd round grade, if you're sitting there really anywhere, pick 50 and beyond, and you draft Chris Brazzell, I like the risk-reward proposition for a team that needs some field stretching ability in their wide receiver room, which applies to a whole lot of NFL teams. So really exciting player here. Before we go any further with today's video, I want to thank the sponsor for today's show, my friends over at SeatGeek. SeatGeek is the #1 ticketing app on the market, and for good reason. Their user interface is easy to use, easy to understand. Green means good, red means bad. So when you're browsing for your seats, just look for the green dots. You know you will be getting the best bang for your buck, not just on the SeatGeek app, but market competitive prices as well. I'm always looking at other apps out there and will find myself back at SeatGeek. They are great about giving you images of exactly what those seats are going to look like. So if you've never been to the venue before, or you're sitting in a different section, you want to know what that view is going to look like, they've got you covered there. You'll get the tickets right there in your app, so you don't have to jump through frustrating email chains or download the tickets into your digital wallet or any of that frustrating stuff I've experienced with other apps as well. SeatGeek has been an amazing partner for me for a long time, and right now on SeatGeek, if you use code TFG10, you will save up to $20 on your next purchase and support my channel as well. So whether you're heading to a sporting event or a concert, SeatGeek has got you covered. Again, it is code TFG10 at checkout. Thank you to SeatGeek. And let's get back to the video. Let's go to my number 12 player who's also really talented but does have some injury questions, and that's Chris Bell out of Louisville. Chris Brazzell, Chris Bell. Got to keep these guys straight here. And it gets a little bit harder because they're back-to-back in my rankings, and that draft range is very comparable for Chris Bell being a second to a fourth-round grade, with the injury really expanding that range in terms of like where you might consider drafting this player. He tore his ACL very late. It was one of the last weeks of the season, so he's going to be pushing right up against the start of the season with his recovery. And this is one of those deals where, you know, just like I said with Jordan Tyson, where I don't have all of the medicals and all of the doctors' opinions on this. Some ACL surgeries go better than others, it feels we've learned. So just kind of comes with that massive injury question mark. But Chris Bell is really explosive, and also, just like we said with Chris Brazzell, like any given year, this is the skill set that you could easily find as a top 10 wide receiver in any given draft class. So for him to be this far down the board for me is again, a true testament to the strength of this draft class. But I want to start with the pro comp on Chris Bell because I really like this one. It's Rashee Rice, someone that, especially Chiefs Rashee Rice. He was a different player in college, but Rashee Rice has been someone that has really dominated in the short game and after the catch on slants, drags, the occasional dig route, tunnel screens. Just have him explode off the line, get the ball in his hands quickly, and make him that speed train runner after the catch. That's where Chris Bell out of Louisville truly thrives. And I think a lot of people's minds go to like Deebo Samuel as well as someone like Chris Bell. And there's a difference there. You know, Deebo was, I would say, more of a true gadget player, whereas Rashee Rice does wide receiver things really well. It's just he is limited in the things you can ask him to do really well. But in terms of beating press, firing inside on a slant, having reliable hands, these things do translate, and I think they will with Chris Bell as well. And I think as a baseline, that's a great reason to get excited about Chris Bell. But I do think there's potentially more to be unlocked, and this Rashee Rice comp could just kind of fade away if Bell gets healthy and you know, expands his game a little bit. Because with Bell, you do see some moments where, like, man, there's some fast feet in there. There's the occasional route down the field when they did ask him to expand that route tree, which wasn't very often, man. But you can see him kind of show the beginnings of some good route running and snappy cuts and all that stuff you're looking for to say, okay, can this guy actually take his explosiveness and a good release that could get even better and be a little bit more of a true X wide receiver, get down the field and be more of a problem vertically as well. Then you could get just tremendously excited about Chris Bell and what he could potentially be. But again, that's more in theory right now based on what we've seen from him. And while when he was in space, he ran some good routes, you did see a guy that the further he got down the field, the more he was bothered by contact. He needs to get better at hand fighting and playing physical down the field, boxing guys out. A lot more of the more nuanced aspects of this position that you want to see from bigger bodied wide receivers. There's a lot still to learn there with Chris Bell. But again, you can ease him into things, especially with that ACL recovery. You can bring him in as just a wide receiver 4 to start and, just get him in on certain packages where he can do what he does well. Get him going on crossing routes, drags, slants, tunnel screens, that kind of stuff. And hopefully as he gets more comfortable with the knee recovery and settles into an NFL building, picks the minds of hopefully some good mentors in that building and a good wide receiver coach, you can see further gains from him down the road. So there's obviously going to be some added risk with a guy not just coming off the ACL. Does he, the biggest trait I have on him is that A grade for his acceleration. Does he fully recover and recapture that burst? That's going to be the biggest question. And then it's going to be, okay, this guy, 62% of his routes in his final year at Louisville were goes, hitches, slants, and drags. Can he expand that and produce on other routes and become a more complete player? That's going to be the next question on him. But there's a lot to like between the size and the burst and the run after catch ability, and someone you could potentially get at a discount in a deeper wide receiver class for a guy coming off of the ACL. If you can get something like Rashee Rice in the 3rd round, I think every NFL team would sign up for that for the most part. So another really fun player here at number 12. Next up with my number 13 wide receiver, he actually carries the same grade as our number 14 wide receiver, so this is wide receiver 13/13A. I'm not afraid to have some of these kind of ties and tier splits within my grading system, as many of you guys know. But it's Malachi Fields out of Notre Dame. Just a transformer of a wide receiver, 6'4", 218 pounds, and all of the play strength to pair with it. Sometimes guys are big and don't have the natural play strength or don't know how to weaponize it. Malachi Fields absolutely does. We mentioned it with like Chris Bell. When Bell gets down the field, sometimes guys will get in his hip pocket and slow him down and have him lose momentum. Malachi Fields understands not just how to run through that and use that play strength to his best advantage, but he'll engage in hand fighting and understands how to use his size to his best advantage. He's got those subtle push-offs at the top of his route that often go uncalled. I can't fully say he's ahead of his time, so to speak, because he is a 5th-year player. You expect him to be a little bit more refined in that sense, but he does definitely understand some of the nuances of the position that do demand that physicality from a player of this archetype who just is not a great athlete and a great overall separator. Like, that is very clear with him when you watch his tape. He's a plodding athlete. He doesn't jump off the line and into his routes. It's okay for a big guy. It's kind of expected with a guy like this. But the snappiness in his routes, the change of direction ability, it's the ability to sink his hips in his routes, it's just not there. I will say when he is out in space and running a post, or if he can pull away on a go ball, he's got sneaky good speed. Like I think there's, with those long strides, like he can push you down the field a decent amount. I think he runs in the middle 4.5s, which for a guy this size, that's totally fine. But that's really not what you're drafting him to do, right? You're drafting him to be a complement to other wide receivers who will provide more juice and separation ability, but someone that can largely run that X wide receiver route tree, work down the sideline, fight back for tough contested catches on comebackers and hitches, work into the middle of the field on dig routes if you get, zone coverage, catch the ball with physicality over the middle of the field. And then also something that he does bring to the table that coaches will value, especially for someone that isn't drafted to be your number 1 or even your number 2 wide receiver, is he blocks his ever-living ass off. And it just is the embodiment of like what you like most about Malachi Fields is that he just plays up to his play strength that a lot of big wide receivers just don't. In fact, a lot of big Notre Dame wide receivers just don't. Chase Claypool, Miles Boykin, Equanimous St. Brown. There's actually a long list of Golden Domers that just didn't play like Malachi Fields. maybe his days at Virginia hardened him a little bit, but I just love that about him. And overall, I had a pretty similar experience watching Malachi Fields as I did with Pat Bryant last year, who made my top 15 last year and kind of surprised a lot of people when he did, but then he kind of picked up some steam leading up to the draft and ended up going in the third round. Fields is a much bigger name here coming out of Notre Dame and honestly has a lot more hype than I'm ranking him at here. I will continue to digress and say I've seen him in like first round mocks and stuff, and I think you're losing the plot a little bit on Malachi Fields for his upside and what you're drafting him to do if you're spending that high of a draft pick on it. I like him in the third round. More than that, it just gets a little bit rich. But what I experienced with Pat Bryant was kind of like I said earlier with Fields, like contact down the field just doesn't bother this guy, whether it's within his routes or when he's attacking the ball down the field. Like, guys do what they tend to do and you know, hit him early or drag on his shoulder or whatever, and it just doesn't faze him. It's the same trait that A.J. Brown has. Now, Brown has a lot more juice and other things working for him, obviously, but I do think that can play for Malachi Fields, especially if he's paired with a quarterback that's willing to test him while there's someone draped over him. Not every quarterback is willing to do that, but if you are, he can convert a lot of those opportunities. So the most realistic pro comp I wrote down on Malachi Fields is actually Mac Hollins. And look, Mac Hollins, between his time with the Raiders, where he actually had a really nice season with the Raiders, the Bills, and now the Patriots, he's been a very useful number 3 wide receiver inside the role that you ask him to do. I think that's the best pro comp. But I do think there's a world where Malachi Fields does just stun. And I know I kind of poo-pooed the first round stuff. I think it's you're always balancing probability and risk assessment. Like, I don't think it's likely that he becomes more than a Mac Hollins type of guy, but there is a little bit of an it factor with Malachi Fields that made me think of like maybe shades of Alshon Jeffrey, who I would say never became a true number 1 type of guy, but maybe a really good number 2 that can provide that size and that true X wide receiver. I think it's in there for Malachi Fields, but the athleticism, the lack of separation ability, I think probably makes that a little bit less likely. But another really fun player here, man. This is a good class. All right, let's go to my number 14 wide receiver who carries the same grade as Malachi Fields. I just give the slight nod in preference to Fields there. But Jordan Hudson out of SMU. I think this might be the guy inside my top 15 this year, like Pat Bryant was last year, that people are like, I haven't heard of this guy. But got through his tape when I was hoping to go to the Senior Bowl and then had all my flights canceled, but was really impressed by the completeness of Jordan Hudson's game at SMU. He just checks a lot of boxes, man. He's 6'1.5", about 200 pounds. He's got that nice balanced overall frame that allows him to be athletic enough to separate, but big enough to have some of the play strength aspects of the position you're looking for. So as a baseline, I think you're talking about a guy that will be able to separate against NFL competition just with the requisite athleticism across the board. He's got really good burst into his routes. He's got the long speed. He's got foot speed and fluid hips and change of direction ability, and he's got technique within his routes. He's really good with head fakes to throw off-zone defenders off. He's got plenty of snap in his routes. He can threaten to all 3 levels of the field. So I like that as a baseline. And then showed some pretty good hands. He had a pretty steady rate of like middling drop rate that you just want to see him improve it a little bit. He had 4 drops in each of his last 2 seasons. Not the end of the world, but I wouldn't say he's got the best overall consistency or ball skills. I think he can do a better job at times, like boxing out defenders to win tough catches and stuff, but you do see him win some really tough catches at times, and has really good body control to kind of contort near the sideline or around traffic and elevate and come down with some really tough catches as well. So there's a lot of pros in there with his hands and his ability to catch the football. And then the run after catch is really good with him too. He just kind of has a little bit of everything. That first step helps him break angles from guys, flying down from a curl flat on a bubble screen, or if he catches the ball over the middle of the field, safeties can take bad angles on him and miscalculate his acceleration. He's got breakaway speed to a certain extent. He's got really good stop-start ability, and he's got enough play strength to kind of shrug off guys and make guys miss. good creativity on top of all that. He had 16 missed tackles forced last year. So just kind of a do-it-all balanced wide receiver that maybe doesn't stand out as elite in any one department, but someone that I think his game should translate to the next level. I wrote down Rashad Bateman as a comp, who's almost an identical size profile, and you look at what Rashad Bateman has ultimately been for the Ravens, probably a wide receiver 3, right? He's had his ups and downs. He's had some drop issues, just like Jordan Hudson has flashed at times, but a very useful player for someone that you could get, I think, in the 3rd or 4th round, maybe even later, depending on how the rest of the league sees him. I don't know. He was a Senior Bowl invite, so he's obviously on the high-end radar of the NFL and their scouts. But, he might slip into the 4th round and be a little bit of a value or something like that. But just a nice overall player that I really liked. Then we get to my number 15 wide receiver, and this will be another couple of guys that did come in with the same grade at that 6.15 mark. And I just want to remind you guys, if you want details on so much of what you're seeing on the screen here, you can check that description down below. Again, while you're scrolling down, make sure you subscribe, like the video, really does help me out. And maybe even while you're hanging out in the description box, you can check out my merchandise store. Get yourself a nice TFG hoodie. Find the It's Draft Season hoodie that I was wearing for part 1 of the video as well. But let's talk about my number 15 guy here. That is Skyler Bell out of UConn. And this is another player with a lot of juice, especially very sneaky long speed. This is what I really liked about Skyler Bell as a baseline is he is an excellent route runner. I'll talk more about that, but he really tempos his routes well. He seems to have a high level kind of deep understanding of route running, and whether it's double moves or if he's running a post or whatever it might be, he really sets guys up well and kind of understands the timing of plays where he'll almost bait defenders into running at a certain speed, and then he will, with the snap of a finger, hit a 3rd gear. And the GPS numbers on him consistently saw him like over 22 miles per hour. There's some really good sneaky speed in there. I'm curious to see what he runs. I think on tape you see a guy that hits speeds consistent with like 4.3 40 times, so that'll be interesting to see. So that kind of pre-qualifier of sneaky good speed is a fun kind of pre-qualifier to understand a little bit of the type of upside you maybe can unlock with a guy like Skyler Bell. But he's pretty good in a lot of different areas. I think, you go down the board with route running and his ball skills, and there's pros and there's cons. Like, let's start with his route running and his separation skills. You see a lot of good in there. I already mentioned kind of the way he tempos routes. I love that. And because he's not always playing at that 3rd gear, if you will, when he's at his 2nd gear, you do see some of the more fluid movement skills, the foot speed able to be tapped into a little bit more. Whereas when he hits that top gear, it's like, nope, we're going. Like, we're not cutting, we're not slowing down or anything like that. But when he's able to work in space, you can see he's really, worked at his footwork, and he can snap off routes, and like there's a really good baseline of route running in there. I will say there's still a lot to prove there. He was kind of a one-year wonder here who had to really leave Wisconsin, which I get it. Wisconsin is not a, passing infrastructure reaping with opportunities. So I get leaving that program, but he had to transfer down to UConn. With all due respect to the Huskies, he had to transfer down to UConn to see his first year of real production there. So it's a relevant note, I think, but especially on tape, again, against a lower level of competition, it didn't happen too much, but you did see some issues when he faced some more physical corners and guys were able to get in his hip pocket. I don't think he fully understands how to play physical through his routes, how to deal with contact down the field. It's just something you naturally have to see more at the NFL level, and he's going to have to continue to develop in his routes. He doesn't have great play strength to pull through defenders in his area. So there's more still to develop in his route running, but you like a lot of the baseline there. And then when you get to his overall ball skills, really all over the map with Skyler Bell. While he gets the excuse of Wisconsin's passing infrastructure not being very good, he had brutal drop rates in his time at Wisconsin, and I'm sure there's Badgers fans watching this like, I don't want anything to do with Skyler Bell, because his drop rates before this most recent season were 14.3, 15.6, and 14%. before he was able to clean it up to 3.8% this year, where he had just 4 drops this season on a lot of targets. He had 141 targets in this offense, a lot of production in that final year, over 1,200 yards at UConn. So he did have a big year this last year at UConn, really burst onto the scene in that sense. But just like we said with Brazzell, you can tell he's just not fully a natural catcher of the football yet. Even if he's not registering a drop, you see double clutches, you see him fighting the ball at times, where he's finally able to secure it, but that can lead to more drops in the future, and it definitely reduces your run after catch potential on those plays as well. And then one thing I really don't know what to make about Skyler Bell is he does have that same trait that you would have said about like Jaden Reed or Tyler Lockett coming out, or last year there was Jalen Royals out of Utah State had this, where you look at a guy who's 5'11", 187 pounds, almost an identical size profile to those names we just listed, and you watch him go down the field and win tough catches that you're like, how did he do that? And how does he do it as consistently as he did? He converted 65% of his contested catches in 2025, and he's actually 50% on his career, so he hasn't always been that good, but it's actually something he was able to do at times at Wisconsin. So you pair that with the ability to kind of deceive defenses and explode down the field, like you kind of get excited about some of the ways you could use Skyler Bell to create explosives for your offense. And talk about explosives, he's also really good after the catch as well. Again, against a lower level of competition, but a ton of shiftiness and creativity in that sense as well. So there's a lot to like with this guy. It's just, there's some rough around the edges, man. Mentioned some of the tape concerns with drops and playing physical through contact at all times. And you're talking also about a 24-year-old prospect. He'll turn 24 in July, who had 1 year of production, who had to leave the Big Ten to really produce. So, like, there's some negatives here. There's some pretty nice positives. I definitely think third round, I'm comfortable with him. I've got a third to a fourth round grade on him. And he's a continuation of this being a pretty freaking nice wide receiver class, because I think he can be a capable starter in the league. The pro comp, I went with him, and I struggled with this to find the right comp, unique player to find the perfect comp for, but Curtis Samuel was where I landed on. Undersized receiver that had deceptive speed to get down the field, could make some tough catches, but was inconsistent and left a lot to be desired in terms of the overall completeness in his game at times as well. So that's where I landed there. Let's move on to my number 16/15B wide receiver. So with the same overall grade there, third to a fourth round range, Lewis Bond out of Boston College. Same grade, but a pretty different overall player. Bond is a pure slot guy. He's 5'11", 197 pounds, so he's shorter but very stocky and compact. And he's not very fast. I would be stunned if he runs anything better than a 4.5. I've got him estimated at a 4.54, so not terrible speed, but that's certainly not a strength for him or how he wins. He wins with, I would say, really good feet, really good technique, and just this kind of scrappy, physical consistency in his game. He's clearly taken the time in his 5 years to refine his routes, especially in the short to intermediate game. Was really good at the Senior Bowl as well, where you can just see the head fakes, you can see the foot fair, the deceptiveness in his routes, has all of the acceleration and agility to snap off these routes, create that step and a half of separation that as long as you're playing with a quarterback who's playing within the timing of the offense, you get those little windows, you catch the ball, and then he has super consistent hands, consistently plucks it, reels it in, has those easy, smooth transitions to runner after the catch. Feels like there's a lot more guys in this class than I normally would point out, where they fight the ball a little bit more. They'll jump for the ball. They'll just do things before they catch the ball that force them to take an extra step, an extra moment to collect themselves before they turn up field and produce after the catch. Not Lewis Bond. Like, he is so seamless in that sense. He's good for what he is at using the strength that he does have. Again, stocky player. He's good at kind of boxing guys out on slants and winning tough catches when he is covered over the middle of the field. Not a very large catch radius. Like, you got to put the ball on him. He's not going to make a bunch of catches outside of his frame. He's a true slot player in that sense. But he also has some of that sturdiness after the catch, too. He converts into a runner quickly, and once he gets that head upfield, he can shrug off some tackles with contact balance. He's got decent jump cuts, decent creativity. He's not overly explosive, but he can turn a 6-yard, target into a 10 or an 11-yard reception, and that provides value. And the other thing I like about him too is, he doesn't necessarily have all the traits to beat press coverage, and he's going to play in the slot where he's not going to see as much press. But if teams do try to press him, he has good technique to get off of press. He's got really quick feet to do so. So this is a guy that can get open quickly, catch the ball, do a little bit after the catch. He's a pretty simple projection here, and someone that I really do like his pro comp as well, and that's Parker Washington out of Penn State, who's taken a little bit of time to really come into his own, but really fit this mold with a similar physical profile. And we saw Parker Washington really break through in Jacksonville this year, so much so they just came out and said today that Travis Hunter is going to be primarily a cornerback next year because they think Parker Washington can be a nice wide receiver 3 for them. So if you need some help in the slot and you got 3rd or 4th round pick, totally fine with taking Louis Bond, and I expect he's going to be competing for an opportunity to start in that role sooner rather than later. All right, then we get to one of the more polarizing players on this list. Deshaun Stribling is my number 17 wide receiver, and I do have a 3-way tie for these next 3 wide receivers. It's definitely common as you get further down the board. The grades get tighter and tighter, and you get these clusters of guys, which I like, being able to showcase that. But Stribling was my favorite of this next cluster of 3 wide receivers here. And, man, another really fun player here, dude. I think this is a guy that has some red flags in terms of, bust potential. But there's some high-end stuff he does that can get you really excited as well. So we'll kind of do some good cop, bad cop analysis with Stribling and just start with the good on him. Number 1, bigger guy, 6'2", 210 pounds, has lots of play strength to boot. And at that size, he's got really good burst as well. And I think you especially see that burst after the catch where, his speed, it's kind of hard to make out truly how fast he is. I've got him estimated at running a 4.54. But what you do see on tape is he'll catch a slant or a crossing route, and that kind of 5-yard burst that he has, it breaks angles all the time. So guys will undercut their pursuit angles, and Stribling just turns the corner and he's off to the races. So there's a little bit of that kind of Rashee Rice, Chris Bell that we praised in there, where if you use him in those situations, he will pair that with his big frame and really good run after catch ability. He's one of the better wide receivers in this draft class in terms of run after catch ability because he kind of has that speed train style. He's tough to get down after the catch, but then you start to look at his down the field targets, especially in the second half of his final year at Ole Miss, and you really start to see some impressive ball skills that get you pretty excited about him. His body control is impressive, and I think that body control helps him with contact balance in some of that run after catch stuff too. So I don't question that this is a good athlete in the sense of body control and someone that can weaponize those little subtle movements at the position that we don't talk enough about, whether it's taking an extra step to win body positioning or, timing your jumps or contorting for a tough catch. He's got all that stuff. And some of the catches he made down the stretch were just really impressive highlight reel grabs. And then you start to break down okay, he doesn't have a high drop rate. He's got good, consistent hands. He had just 1 drop this year on 74 targets. He's at 3 different programs, 5 years in college football. He's seen over 345 targets. He's only got 9 drops, a career drop rate of 4% that again, finished very strong this year. And you pair that with the ability to make some of these incredible catches down the field, and you start to kind of, your imagination starts to open up with some of the different ways you can use this guy. Now, I will say he's got to get a lot better at playing physical consistently down the field. I think in a true jump ball situation, he's pretty good at handling contact, but I think if it's a slant or if he's running a hitch or he's working back to the QB, I think he needs to do a much better job of understanding like how to use his frame to box guys out and deal with guys draping over his back and his shoulders and winning more contested catch targets. He only converted 44% of his contested catch targets this year, and again they were largely on more of those kind of hit while catching the ball attempts as opposed to like your jump ball type of scenarios. But I think it's all in there to keep getting better at it. And then he also blocks his ass off, man. I love that from him. He weaponizes that strength. He's one of the better run blockers in this draft class. So it's pretty easy to talk yourself into some of the high-end stuff on Deion Stribling. But there's some lows in there for sure. And I think the completeness in his game is lacking. And that's become a pretty consistent theme with these Ole Miss wide receivers at this point, whether it's Jonathan Mingo or Trey Harris last year, who I like. I'm not writing off Trey Harris by any stretch of the imagination. It's become a theme, though, with these kind of bigger wide receivers out of Ole Miss that just run a limited route tree. They're working the sideline. They're run after catch threats, and they just aren't refined receivers. I think you do see that with Deion Stribling, especially when you talk about his route running. Like, he just is, for a fifth-year player that's played at three different programs in 5 years, he's very underdeveloped in his routes. And at this point, you got to question, like, are you going to be able to pick up on all of the different footwork that you need and the deception in your routes and understanding spacing and timing and all that stuff? You get through his film and you notice, like, man, I just don't know quite how well he's going to be able to separate, especially when you watch him move, and he's more of a straight line type of guy. His feet are a little bit heavier. He's got tighter hips. His change of direction is certainly not great. So that's going to be the big knock on him, is like being a complete player and being a diverse route runner. But can he be an X wide receiver and run that, kind of Ole Miss route tree, if you will? This seems to go all the way back to like DK Metcalf and AJ Brown, running goes, hitches, slants, and screens and drags. Yeah, I think he can do that. We'll see how consistently. And then I also think there's just so much run after catch juice in there that he can do some stuff for you. So this draft class, man, it's tough. Like, I really do talk myself into the upside on this player. I already think I'm higher on Stribling than most people are going to have him. But what I put down for my pro comp on him is Juju Smith-Schuster and maybe like mid-career Juju, the guy we saw in Kansas City or later in Pittsburgh. Not the fastest guy, not the best route runner, but can win tough catches, compete after the catch, and block his ass off. There's a lot of Juju in there and a very similar size profile as well. So for the number 17 wide receiver in a draft class, it's a pretty freaking exciting player. I ended up throwing a 4th-round grade on Stribling and definitely could see him being a nice kind of core contributor to an offense, though probably not like a, alpha number 1 type either. But then we get to the next guy on my list, and it's Ted Hurst out of Georgia State. So this is my number 18/17B wide receiver, again with a 4th-round grade here. Fun player, but as tends to be the theme as you get further down the board, you're talking about a guy that has some defining strengths and some defining weaknesses here. Definitely a more of a boomer bust profile here with Ted Hurst, I think. And someone that I really like, the final pro comp that I landed on with him. We'll get to that. But Hurst is 6'3", just under 210 pounds. He can run like the wind. I think he runs 4.4 or better. He's got really good acceleration. You watch him out in space especially, and like he can move, man. He can snap off routes. He's got decent route running out in space. You see him take on press coverage at the line of scrimmage at times. You didn't see a ton of press coverage, but when he did, it's like, man, this guy can get out and go. He had long speeds by GPS tracking that surpassed 22 miles per hour, so he can absolutely take the top off the defense and stretch the field vertically, and especially, again, if you give him space and off-zone coverage, he can snap off a comeback or a hitch route or a dig route. Like, there's a lot to like in the way that this guy moves for a bigger wide receiver. He's not huge, but 6'3", 207 is very good size. And I think a lot of people are enamored with the potential of that. as you should be. And there's other highs as well in terms of like winning spectacular catches. You do see some really high-end highlight catches from Ted Hurst. You see him weaponize that juice after the catch, where, you know, he can pull away from you. He can shrug you off with some of that size that he does have, especially if he catches it in stride when he's moving. So again, there's a lot of high-end stuff in there with Ted Hurst, but some big negatives on him as well that he's going to have to get better at. Number one is, while he is 6'3", 207 pounds, he is an example of someone that I think does not play up to his play strength. I'm not calling Ted Hurst soft, but he plays soft. He lets physical coverage disrupt him in his routes down the field, and if he's got a DB around him and he's trying to win a tough contested catch, he's gonna let his arms get knocked around. He's not gonna box guys out appropriately and win those tough catches as consistently as you want from a bigger wide receiver. In fact, having watched his tape before his weigh-in, I was actually surprised he came in at 207 pounds because I thought he looks, really lengthy. He's got long 33 and a quarter inch arms, which, it's great to have those to high point balls and make some tough catches. But that's a lot of real estate on his frame for DBs to kind of mess with. And when he doesn't have filled out play strength, you do see it impact his game. You really do. And then the drops, man. 13 drops in his last 2 seasons combined at Georgia State. He's liable to put the ball on the turf or pop it up in the air for an interception at any given moment. And then you're also talking about a guy that played at Georgia State who already struggles with physicality. There's going to be a giant leap in level of competition. So there are negatives and things that he's going to have to overcome and get better at when he gets to the league. So he's got kind of boom or bust potential here for sure. The pro comp I went with him is Andre Iosivas, who almost an identical prospect in my opinion. Played at Princeton, had almost an identical frame, identical like physical abilities, struggled with drops, struggled to play up to his frame, caught a lot of eyes at the Senior Bowl where you see the traits, but can he reel it all in? And I would say Andre Iosivas has had some really up and down moments for the Cincinnati Bengals. And I think a lot of Bengals fans would say I probably wouldn't sign up for that experience again, but you never know. Different human here in Ted Hurst to see kind of how things translate to a higher level of competition, how he continues to get better. A lot to work with, a lot of juice, a lot of big playability here with this guy. Just a lot of rough around the edges as well. And then my number 19 wide receiver, again, 17C, number 19, someone I don't really know what to do with here, Deion Burks out of Oklahoma. Burks in 5 seasons of football had just under 1,700 yards, only 58 catches for 600 yards at Oklahoma. Another relatively lackluster year on a 5-year career, never surpassed the 629-yard season he had at Purdue in 2023. So not a super productive player. He's 5'9". There's reasons to just kind of dismiss this guy for sure. But dude, the tape on Deion Burks is really good. I mean, he is clearly a special athlete, dude. The way that he can explode into his routes, change directions, go in and out with his routes, the foot speed to set guys up. Like, he separates on tape running a bunch of different types of routes at Oklahoma. Working the short game, digs, corner routes, you name it, even getting open deep on go balls and double moves and posts. It's all in there. He also has like really good footwork at the line of scrimmage. Like, I think he's going to be able to beat press coverage with his burst and foot speed. A lot of people think about size in terms of beating press coverage. That's one way to do it with that gangster release, as they call it, where you just shove guys off and go. But with great footwork and technique, you can have those 2-step releases and beat guys with finesse and agility as well. And he's able to do that when he saw press coverage. And then in terms of his ability to catch the ball, like, he had some drops. He had 3 drops this year, drop rate of 4.9%. So there's some of that in there. Just 1 drop last year for 3.1%. So there's some drops in there, but pretty good drop rate. Like, I think his hands are good. He attacks the ball with his hands. He looks natural catching the ball to me. And he actually came down with 56% of his contested catch targets in his last 2 years at Oklahoma. So he's 188 pounds at 5'9", so he's decently like sturdy. And you watch his tape, he does have just like a competitive feistiness about him. It's just weird that he wasn't a better player in college in 5 years, because you see so much to like, and it's just like, what's missing here? Is it an Oklahoma problem? Is there a lack of chemistry with him and his receivers? What's the deal? And that's where he finds himself as the 19th wide receiver, that with the size questions. But man, I can see it with him as a very functional, like either slot or Z receiver, something, I think the best case real scenario is something like Josh Downs, what like Cole Beasley was for a long time, something like that. I think he can play outside. The first name that came to my mind when I said that was like Tank Dell, in the way that they kind of keep him off the line and he plays a little bit in and out. There's these small wide receivers that come to mind that I see flashes of that with Deion Burks. Now, the pro comp I went down, a lot of my pro comps are more about like skill set and the level of players that I think they could be. This one was a little more unique because this is such a unique player. I just wrote down Marvin Mims, who ironically did play at Oklahoma. It's not about that. He reminds me of Broncos Marvin Mims, who I have said for multiple years. I watched Sean Payton call that offense, and I'm like, why doesn't he get the ball more? Because he's shifty after the catch. He can compete down the field. He can run different types of routes. Marvin Mims always looks good when they use him, and they just don't use him enough. The experience felt eerily familiar with Deion Burks. I don't know. He probably will get to the league and be like a 5th-round pick and probably like not produce, but this is just one of those guys where I just think another change of scenery, get him in the right spot, give him an opportunity, put a belief system behind him that he can be a productive player. He does so many different things well. I can see it. But he did land with a 4th-round grade for me, and he's going to be one of the more fascinating players to track, I think, out of this list here today. But yeah, that cluster of 3 guys there was kind of a boom or bust range of 4th-round options. Now, I do have another cluster of 3 players that are tied for number 20. I'm going to talk about them kind of more quickly at the very end of this. What I wanted to do here for the 10th kind of highlight player for this video is talk about a guy that hasn't made the list yet, that I think a lot of people are going to be asking about, that I wanted to talk about, who I actually have to shift to more of a negative tone and kind of call my shot that I think this guy's going to be a bust. And that's Jacobe Lane out of USC. Someone I've seen people say is a top 5 wide receiver in this draft. I think in reality probably gets drafted 3rd or 4th round. We'll see what ends up happening with him. But I just don't get it. He actually came out as my number 29th wide receiver right now, and I have written up 35 wide receivers, so he could continue to fall. I will probably have write-ups on north of 40 guys come draft day, and I will remind you guys, if you want access to all of the write-ups, all the information you see on screen, and 2 times over players that we didn't talk about here today, if you go over to my Patreon, it's patreon.com/thatfranchiseguy, you can get access to my full draft board. You also will get access to my Studs and Duds series that has made the move to exclusive content. So if you're looking for that series, that's where to find it as well. You support my channel and get, at this point, tons of bonus content as well. But yeah, at this point in time, Jacobe Lane is wide receiver 29 for me. I think you can draft him. He's got that kind of like draftable late day 3 grade that becomes almost like a placeholder ranking for some of these very low ranking players. So 5th to 7th round, if you want to take a flyer on him at 21 years old and see what happens, sure. But if you're drafting him ahead of all the guys we've talked about here today in the 3rd round or ranking them crazy high like I've seen for some people, I just simply cannot get there. And I'll tell you why. I mean, he's 6'4", 196 pounds. I can't stress how thin that is. And in USC's weight room, this guy in 3 years couldn't put on a pound of muscle. I mean, what is that all about? And it goes a step further than that. If you're gonna be 6'4", 196 pounds, I want to see some juice, right? Like, that's pretty close to Chris Brazzell, who's 6'5", 200. Like, yeah, Brazzell has questions with play strength, but he can fly and snap off routes and change directions and separate. Dude, Jacobe Lane moves like he's 230 pounds. So even if he did put on weight, how much slower is he going to be? Because I think at 196 pounds, he's going to run in the 4.6s. This dude turns like a semi-truck. His feet are heavy as hell. He has no route running polish in the short to intermediate game. He's spent some time to understand double moves and like occasionally can snap some stuff off deep with some deception. I'll give him some credit there. And I think there's some moments with his release where he can occasionally win off the line, but for the most part, man, this guy is going to get locked down by NFL corners, and I feel very confidently saying that, especially if the idea is he's got to put on weight. I don't think the athletic ability is in there for him. But even him putting on weight at this point is a major question, and if he doesn't, I mean, dude, he gets absolutely derailed by physical contact in his routes. If he's trying to run down the sideline, corners can just stick their arm out and he'll get like pressed out of bounds within his routes. And it shows up in his consistency to win contested catches. He only won 43.5% of his contested catch targets. And that's just not good enough. I mean, that's selling it short. That's horrible for a guy that does not separate, who's going to have to dominate on contested catches. Now, like, I gave him an A grade for catch radius. Like, his leaping ability is there. His length is insane. He is the definition of a highlight reel wide receiver. If you're just going to YouTube and you type in highlight reel for all of these different players and you try to form a scouting report off of that, Jacobe Lane's probably going to make your top 10. And with all due respect to the people that have him there, I really do kind of question if that's what's happening. If you're just watching highlight reels on these guys and trying to do your wide receiver rankings off of that, because I get it. If that's your process, then yeah, like you watch the 7 best plays of Jacobe Lane and you're like, yeah, he's one of the best wide receivers in the draft. But you actually watch the tape and you see like, okay, there's a lot more of those contested catch targets that don't go his way, that don't make the highlight reel, where you see the lengthy frame working against him. And then you actually are exposed by the All-22 to his routes and you're like, dude, this guy cannot get open. And you watch him at the Senior Bowl and it's all of the same. Like, I don't know, in drills that are set up for the wide receivers to dominate, I'm sure he had to have had a reception, but Jacobe Lane, I don't know if he caught a pass at the Senior Bowl in my watch. It was very ugly Senior Bowl tape. So I think he's a bust. My pro comp on him is Benjamin Victor, which I'll shout out. Roster Watch on Twitter shared a clip of Jacobe Lane, repeating a lot of the issues I've had. And they pointed out like there's 4 wide receivers 6'4" and under 200 pounds in the last 10 years. 2 of them ran like a 4.4 and were busts. And the other 2 were out of the league. And Benjamin Victor is one of those guys who's currently playing in the UFL, was a big-bodied guy out of Ohio State that some people like because of the highlight reel grabs. But look, if you're sitting there in the 7th round, honestly, and all these other guys are gone and you don't know who to pick and you've got a spot in your wide receiver room to throw a dart, like, sure, I guess. But I do not like this player. I think his probability of working in the NFL is extremely low. So I decided to use my time really focusing on that player, but I don't want to sell you guys short. I do want to at least give you my number 20 wide receiver. It's a 3-way tie. I'm going to give you just kind of like snapshot analysis here on three guys here that I do still like, that have early day 3 grades that I could see being starters in the league. So number 20 for me is Antonio Williams out of Clemson. He was a pretty easy write-up for me. He's a slot archetype. He's, 5'10", 190 pounds. He's got really good acceleration. He's got good routes. He's got solid hands. It's just there's kind of a limited upside with him overall, but I think someone that can compete to be a starting slot wide receiver in the league. And then Eric McAllister out of TCU, really a fun watch. Another guy that if you watch his highlight reel, he's going to end up probably in your top 10 wide receiver list. He has some of the most batshit crazy plays in this draft, whether it's making tough catches down the field or where he's most impressive is he'll like catch a slant and break 3 tackles and then he's off to the races. He's a bigger wide receiver. He's like 6'3", 210 or so. So he's got some of that size profile you're looking for, but there's like multiple plays in his final season where he's just like embarrassing defenses by catching a standard pass and then turning it into like a 60-yard touchdown. So there's some really high-end stuff with him. I thought the overall route running, he's a stiffer athlete. He's able to pick up his feet and show some shiftiness after the catch, but really like the overall separation ability I've got concerns about. And the ball skills were, highs and lows overall, which is kind of a norm for TCU wide receivers, to be honest. So I'm willing to take a chance on him early day 3. Could be kind of a sleeper there. And then Reggie Virgil, he's someone that depending on his 40 time, I could see bumping him up a little bit. He's a one-trick pony. He kind of only does one thing, and that's run go balls and crossing routes. He's a 6'2", 190-pound guy that has pretty good speed on tape, but I wasn't able to get a full sense of just how fast he was because, honestly, the QB play at Texas Tech this year was tough to watch, at least in the vertical passing game, but made some really good stuff happen at the Senior Bowl, and I just see a guy that has a good release. The long speed I'm just very interested in. Like, I think I wrote down tape estimated 40 time on him at a 4.4, but if he runs like a 4.35, I might crank him up a little bit. Like 40 time matters for some guys more than others, and with Virgil, he'll can stack guys deep, has the release, has some interesting moments like tracking the ball over his shoulder. We've seen like the Shamari DKs of the world, Dante Thornton. When you get to the 4th round, that's when these true vertical threats go. So if Virgil's able to run into the 4.3s, like mid to high 4.3s, especially someone I'm definitely fascinated in the vertical threat ability in his game. The rest of everything else he did was okay. But there you go. That's my opinions on 23 wide receivers in this draft class. I will reiterate, I've got 35 written up fully on my Patreon. YouTube members, by the way, also get access to a version of my draft guide as well, and studs and duds. So there's ways to get even deeper analysis on these guys and more players on the list. We are going to turn our eyes next to watching the top players in this draft because I want to get a mock draft out there, but I don't want to talk out of my butt. So I want to get some opinions going on some of the top players in this draft. And then I'm going to turn my eyes to running backs and edge rushers as well. So going to be a busy run up to the draft here. Make sure you guys are subscribed. Again, please do hit that like button if you enjoyed today's video. Let me know your comments down below, what you think of the rankings here today. Cheers, and we'll talk soon. Peace out.